Okay, so we're going to take a look at our performance task, number one for eighth grade. Um, and we're going to internalize what would the outcome of this performance task be. You're going to be watching a lesson with Emily and Michael where they're modeling for you using performance task number one. So before you look at performance task one, I just want to remind you that you can take a look first at your control panel, and that's where you'll find your performance task. But I think it's always a good idea to look at your control panel first because you'll see that it has your unit overview, you'll have your big ideas, your essential questions, and overall you have kind of the big picture of what you want your students to be completing for this unit. You'll also have all of the standards that are outlined. And of course, since it's English, they're going to be a very long list of them. But the good thing is when you click on your performance task, you'll be able to see that they are shortened here at the very top at the beginning of your control panel. And then you'll also be able to see in your guidance documents if you want to have an even smaller picture of that. But I always like to look at that first before we move on to our performance task. After you go into your performance task, you'll see that we have three different performance tasks that we want the students to complete for that unit. And so some of them are broken up into three parts, and you'll notice that that's what happens with performance task one. Now, since it's the beginning of the school year, we think it's imperative for students to kind of build upon their own personal experiences, things that they've internalized maybe within the past year, summertime, and have a narrative writing piece that's connected to that. So ultimately, we know that when we move on to the end of the unit, kind of the middle to towards the end of the unit, they're going to be completing some kind of narrative writing on their own. That's a bigger piece of what they'll be completing in that first performance task. So when you take a look at the performance task, you'll read through it and you'll kind of look through the bullets to kind of help understand what exactly that the students are expected to complete for this unit. So we know that we're going to be looking at examples of mentor texts, and we know that eventually our students are going to be emulating that and creating a 6-word memoir. So as you dig deeper into that, you're going to want to break apart this performance task exactly to see what it is that we want our students to do. And one of the ways that we like to do that is we basically unpack that performance task, each performance task that we do. What I like to do at the very top of unpacking that is to have essentially a sentence that is going to explicitly tell me what is the overall goal for my students to accomplish in this unit. What is it that I want them to do at the end of this unit after we've completed everything? What is the overarching goal? And so you could just write that at the top. This is for you as a teacher, so that way you have a goal and a purpose that you know that everything your students are doing in class is working towards this. So students will study how to closely dissect multiple texts in order to learn beyond the literal meaning of a text and how to emulate these skills in their own writing. So we know that this is at the end of our unit, we want our students to be able to do this, that they can have a text, they can read it, they can analyze it deeply, that they go way beyond the literal meaning, that they'll be able to create their own understanding of it, and then that they will turn around and be able to emulate the skills that they saw the author complete and then put it in their own writing. Okay, so I know that's a lot to do. So how can we break each of those things down? So you'll see in the lesson that you're going to see modeled, the teachers are going to use a steal, which is a strategy that we do like to use in ELAR. And we'll use the steal strategy to kind of like break apart the dissecting and the analyzing of the text. And so before you do that, what I always like to do is I very simply, just, I'll write performance task number one. I know that the strategy that I'm going to use for that specific part, for that first part of that strategy, for that performance task, I'm going to use a steal strategy. So I already have like I know that that's what I'm going to be working towards. But what are the skills that I want my students to accomplish specifically just for that performance task, part one? Right. So, what are some of the things that I want them to be able to do? I want them to make inferences. I want them to create these new meanings. They're going to have to get into a very deep understanding of what are character motivations. I need them to be able to make some connections, not only to other texts and bigger world, but also to their own personal experiences. So there's a lot of different things that I want my students to accomplish. And it's easier to kind of write it out and see, okay, what are the things that are super important? So I need to make sure that I'm touching on multiple times. And then what are the things that maybe I know that I'm going to circle back eventually, but it's not something that I need to be as repetitive as other things. And then what I always like to do is I like to connect my standards to the specific skills that I want my students to do. So I know sometimes in teaching, as teachers, um, we sometimes get caught up in wanting to, I know I did, in something that really interests us or something we really enjoy, or here's an activity or here's a different thing. Like I always like to teach and I enjoy it. And that's great. We really do. We want our students to enjoy our teaching and their time in class, but we also want to make sure that we're always connecting a standard to that specific activity, that specific skill, right? Because if we can't connect our standard to it, then it's really not beneficial to the student at the end of the school year. And this also, as a teacher, kind of helps you because sometimes, you'll really enjoy doing something and then you can't find a standard that connects to it. And then you as a teacher are faced with, okay, I really enjoy it, but I'm going to have to save it for maybe the end of the school year, as opposed to right now, because it's not really a foundational skill that I need my kids to spend a lot of time on. So this kind of mirrors that. And also what this helps is it helps you outline as a teacher, what do you want to teach first? What are you can't jump, for example, you can't jump to teaching, what are the effects of that graphical elements like punctuation and line length at the very beginning because they don't have anything to work with. That's something that that you're going to want to work on towards the end of analyzing and dissecting and after multiple reads, right? Because then you can get into conversations. Wow, like why did our author use so many exclamation points? Or why is there a dash here? Um, why is this? What's the purpose of this run-on sentence, etc. So you really can't start that right at the get-go. You may want to build onto that. There's other things that you continuously do, right? Like those inferencing skills. We're continuously doing that throughout the text and multiple reads of the text. And so this is just one way that we really think that's beneficial and helpful if we work with our students and we kind of help breaking down that performance task.